David Shaw just found out his old friend, Harold Mercer, has gone off the deep end. He's seen things, saying things, and now people are starting to disappear. What will David do next? If you like these dark, twisted tales, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. It really helps the channel grow. Now get ready for part 3 of Inheritance, Bloodlines.
David woke late the next morning, groggy, head pounding faintly from last night's whiskey binge. The weak sunlight filtering through the blinds painted pale stripes across the kitchen table where his half-empty notepad sat waiting. The coffee brewed slow, strong, and familiar. Outside, the early summer sunlight crept through the blinds. He sipped the coffee and flipped through of his notes. Harold, grieving. Understandable. Disappeared, not normal. Occult books, bad sign. Watching shelters, seedy spots. Why? Tess is concerned. Instinct says follow that. David scrawled a final line beneath it all. Next step, library. Dig quietly. The main branch of the Tacoma Public Library stood like an old soldier from another era. Stone columns, weathered facade, and the faint, musty smell of ink and old pages. It was a place most folks overlooked. But David never underestimated what you could learn from dusty records and observant employees. Cassandra Reed was exactly that. Tall, maybe 5'8" in boots, late 30s and caramel skin that didn't come from sunbathing. Her eyes were a striking hazel, flecked with gold that caught the overhead lights just right. It gave her an air of quiet calculation. Her black curls were pinned in a loose, practical twist. Professional, but with a casual defiance. The kind that suggested she'd be equally comfortable running a library or winning a bar fight. Cass had a quiet confidence. The kind honed from years of cataloging everything from overdue romance novels to off-the-books police files whispered between City Hall interns. David had used her as a source more than once. Off the record, naturally. She eyed him the moment he walked in, leaning one hip against the counter, arms crossed. Well, look who decided to pay me a visit. What's wrong? Cat go missing? Dog run off? David offered a faint smirk, that quiet, unreadable PI expression he'd perfected over years. Something like that, he replied, voice carrying the faint edge of military discipline. Need a favor? Her brow lifted. You? A favor? Must be serious. She straightened, tugging at the name badge clipped to her blouse. Shoot. Harold Mercer. You remember him? Cass's playful expression faded, just slightly, before sliding back into character. The councilman lost his daughter. Such a shame. Yeah, I remember him. David leaned in closer. Yeah, well, I've heard he's been doing some extracurricular reading. Weird stuff. David softened his tone, keeping it casual but steady. You able to point me toward his checkout history? Cass hesitated. Technically, that's privileged info, she stated as she let her eyes wander. David offered a soft smile in return. Look, I'm not trying to pry for the hell of it. Harold's been off the grid, grieving, but what I have been hearing has me concerned. I just need to know what he's been into. That's all. Cass studied him, reading the concern behind his words. After a moment, she sighed. You're lucky I like you, Shaw, she muttered, tapping a few keys on the terminal behind her. And you got a point. Minutes later, she handed him a printout. Her eyes skimmed the list as she passed it over a few titles, catching her attention. With what I see, you got every right to be worried, she added, her tone losing its playful edge. That's some pretty heavy reading. The list wasn't long, but it bled red flags. The veil between worlds, infernal pacts, occult hierarchies of the fallen, the Obtenebra Verum, binding circles and summoning rites, a practical guide. David's mind raced like a car with no brakes as he scanned the titles. His time working black ops had drilled into him the value of spotting patterns, the kind most civilians missed entirely. Sometimes that skill was the difference between making it home or ending up zipped in a body bag. These weren't the reading topics of a grieving man looking for comfort. This was preparation, operational research, a calculated descent into something darker. This was operational intel on how to court hell. Jesus, Harold, David muttered. Cass tilted her head, concern flickering across her face. You want to tell me what you're digging into? David folded the printout neatly, slipping it into his coat pocket. Let's just say, old friend might be knocking on doors better left closed. Cass frowned. Look, Shaw, be careful with that stuff. You start poking in the dark, sometimes it pokes back. David offered the faintest smile, though it never quite reached his eyes. Instead, a flicker of wary understanding glinted there, the kind of look that came from seeing too much and trusting too little. Story of my life. He tipped 2 fingers to his brow in a lazy half-salute, then turned for the exit. The sun was out now, bright but cool, casting long shadows along the quiet streets. David slipped the folded list deeper into his pocket and kept walking. The questions were stacking up, and Harold Mercer was looking more like a threat than a tragedy. That night, David sat at his dining table, the list of books laid out before him alongside a battered leather notebook. The overhead light buzzed faintly as he read, flipping between pages and scribbling notes in tight, military shorthand. The deeper he read, the worse it looked. Summoning rites, binding circles, sigils meant to hold things that shouldn't be walking this side of reality. Half the terms he recognized from his old black ops briefings, fringe elements the military quietly monitored but never acknowledged publicly. Harold? David muttered under his breath, shaking his head. If you're mixed up in this shit... He didn't finish the thought. Didn't want to. Sometime past midnight, his eyes grew heavy. The notes blurred on the page and sleep called out to him. David woke the next morning to sunlight warming the room. He rubbed his face, the faint imprint of his own scribbles pressed into his cheek. After a quick shower and coffee, he thumbed through his phone, paused, and called Dylan. He needed a break from all this. The weight of what he was finding out weighed on him like a fat man sitting on his shoulders. Dad? Dylan answered, the usual background noise of campus life buzzing faintly behind him. Hey kid, just checking in. How's college treating you? Busy, brutal. Dylan chuckled. You know how it is. You survive high school, they throw you into the deep end. David smirked faintly. You'll swim. You always do. Appreciate the confidence, Dylan replied. Look, I'm heading to class, but I'll call you later, all right? Yeah, stay sharp. Always? Dylan clicked off. Moments later, a new text buzzed through, a number from the Tribune. Meet, diner, noon, missing persons. David pocketed his phone and grabbed his keys. The usual diner, Benny's, sat tucked on a quiet corner, the kind of place where the coffee never tasted great, but the information flowed. Warren Blake was already seated, mid-40s, round face, wire rim glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, a tweed jacket that smelled like cigarettes and old newsprint. Warren had the classic print reporter gone digital look, rumpled, sharp-eyed, and dogged as hell. Appreciate you coming, Warren said, sipping his coffee as David slid into the booth. What's up? Warren slid a manila folder across the table. Missing persons, spiking. Real quiet, though. Cops aren't making noise yet, but it's there. Folks vanish. Shelters, back alleys, strip clubs. David flipped through photos and reports, his brow tightening. "There's more," Warren added, voice lowering. "Yates." David's head snapped up. "What about him?" Warren exhaled. "Found dead in his cell." He hesitated, then added, "Not the normal kind of dead either. Hung himself." "People hang themselves every day," David replied flatly. "With their own intestines?" Warren countered. David froze. "Guard found him. Gutted. Used his own damn guts to string himself up. Blood everywhere. It'll hit tomorrow's edition." David leaned back, the diner fading into background noise as the implications clawed at his mind. Harold, missing persons, demonology, Yates. The noose was tightening, and he was standing right in the middle of it. Warren noticed the shift in his expression, the way the color drained from David's face. "You look spooked," Warren said, voice low. "You know something about this?" David gathered himself quickly, masking the edge in his voice. "No, just shocked, that's all. How the hell does a man do that to himself? Wild." Warren studied him for a second longer, but let it go, sliding his coffee aside. "Usual fee?" David nodded, slipping a few bills onto the table. "If you get anything juicier." Warren smirked. "I'll take care of you like always." His grin was faint but familiar. "You know I'm good for it." They exchanged a few quiet, dry jokes, the kind only old acquaintances in the same trenches shared, before David slid from the booth. Time to get started. David slid into his truck outside the diner, flipping through the folder as the engine idled. Faces stared back, gritty, grainy photos of the missing. Most were homeless. Some were streetwalkers from the bad side of town. Vulnerable, forgotten, easy targets. His stomach tightened as Tessa's words echoed back. Harold parked near shelters, watching, waiting. "Christ, Harold," David muttered, shoving the file onto the passenger seat. "Tell me you ain't mixed up in this." The drive took him through the arteries of Tacoma, past the hushed, respectable neighborhoods and deeper into the rot. The district had a name once. The locals just called it the Strip now. Used to be nightlife, clubs, cheap diners, neon signs promising live music and cheaper thrills. Then Vega moved in. The butcher's fingerprints smothered this place now. Illegal trade, extortion, muscle on every corner. The glow of neon had faded to flickering shadows. Most folks with sense avoided it like the plague, unless they had business Vega's people catered to. David found a quiet spot tucked between two boarded-up storefronts. From here, he had a clear view of the street, the slow drift of women working the corners, shadows huddled in alleys, cars crawling by with windows cracked just enough for whispered exchanges. But parked back where the streetlight couldn't touch him, David was just another shadow. He watched for nearly an hour. The strip moved like clockwork, cars creeping by, deals whispered through cracked windows, the women pacing the corners in heels that had seen better days. Nothing abnormal. Just the quiet churn of desperation and profit. But David's gut told him to dig deeper. Sliding out of the truck, he scanned the sidewalk until one of the girls caught his attention. Blonde, Caucasian, maybe 22, 23, but life had added 5 years to her eyes. Voluptuous figure beneath a tight, worn outfit, fishnets clinging to pale legs, cheap heels scuffed at the toes, a leather jacket 2 sizes too small. Her face, round, soft beneath the grit, still held faint echoes of a girl who hadn't started down this path yet. Her name, she told the Johns, was Crystal. It fit the territory. David approached slow, posture casual but watchful. "Got a minute?" Crystal's eyes flicked over him, wary, calculating. "You a cop?" she asked flatly. "Private investigator," David replied, voice steady. "Just looking to ask a few questions." She frowned, glancing toward the mouth of the alley. "Vegas guys don't like us chatting too long if it ain't business." David nodded. "How much for your time?" She sized him up, military build, sharp eyes, then smirked faintly. 50. "Done?" David replied without hesitation, peeling the bill from his wallet. Surprise flickered across her face, but she pocketed the cash quick. They walked toward his truck, parked in the shadows. Crystal slowed as they neared the vehicle, tension creeping into her shoulders. "This where I end up dead?" David offered a faint, tired smile. "Relax. Just questions." Reluctant but curious, and with $50 already hers, she climbed in. Inside, David pulled a photo from the folder, one of the missing women. "You know her?" Crystal's eyes darkened with recognition. "Yeah, Lexi." Her lips tightened. "She left." David's brow furrowed. "Left?" "Vega's been talking about expanding," Crystal explained, voice low. "Upstate, new territory. He asked some of us if we wanted in. More money, new faces. Lexi took the deal." "That normal?" David responded. Crystal shrugged, eyes drifting to the street. "Nothing round here is normal." Her gaze lingered on the photo for a moment longer. "Far as I know, 2 girls took the offer. Lexi was one. The other, girl named April. Sweet kid, barely old enough to be out here." She shook her head. "Vega's guys made it sound like opportunity. Fresh start. But they ain't been seen since." David's jaw tightened. "Anyone else go?" Crystal shrugged, chewing her bottom lip. "Maybe more. Hard to say. Girls come and go. But those 2, I knew 'em, and they're gone." David slipped his hand into his coat and retrieved a business card. He held it out. "If you hear anything, names, locations, rumors, call me, no matter how small it sounds." Crystal eyed the card like it might bite, but after a second she took it, tucking it into the side of her boot. "Yeah, all right." "Vega say where this new spot was?" David pressed. She hesitated, then nodded. "Upstate. Someplace called Elma. Heard it in passing. Real small town, logging country or something." David committed it to memory. He'd look into it later. Crystal reached for the door but paused, turning back with a faint, teasing smirk. "You sure you don't want anything else for your 50? David's expression stayed flat, but his voice carried a thread of quiet humor. "Tempting, but I'm good." She chuckled softly, slipping out of the truck. Before closing the door, she leaned down, eyes twinkling just faintly. "Your loss?" Then she winked and sauntered off into the shadows, heels clicking against the crumbling pavement. David exhaled, watching her go, then returned his attention to the folder. "Elma," he muttered to himself, flipping through the missing persons list one last time. "No other leads here for now. Time to hit the shelters." The downtown shelter sat tucked beneath an aging overpass, wedged between a liquor store and a boarded-up thrift shop. Faded murals peeled from its cinder block walls, optimistic slogans about dignity and second chances. But the faces lingering outside told a different story. David parked down the block and walked the rest of the way, shoulders loose but eyes sharp. Inside, the place hummed with quiet chaos. Volunteers sorting supplies, a few worn-out souls hunched over donated meals, the faint aroma of disinfectant and stale coffee lingering beneath it all. Greg Hutchins ran the joint, early 50s, long face, tired eyes framed by wire rim glasses, salt and pepper beard creeping down his jaw like moss on a stone. The man looked like he'd spent every ounce of good intentions fighting an uphill battle. And losing. "Shaw?" Greg greeted as David approached, voice low but steady. "Didn't expect to see you down here." "Looking into some things," David replied. "You got a minute?" Greg nodded, leading him toward the small office tucked behind the front desk. Inside, the walls were cluttered with community flyers and faded Polaroids. Missing persons, mostly. "I'm chasing down leads on the missing," David explained. "Figured this place might know something." Greg exhaled, sinking into the rickety chair behind his desk. "Wish I could help. Truth is, people come and go from here all the time. Folks with nothing got a habit of disappearing. Sometimes it's a choice, sometimes not. But unless they checked in regularly, we don't always clock it." David scanned the wall of photos, too many familiar faces. "You see Harold Mercer down here?" David asked finally. Greg shook his head. "Nah, name rings a bell, but..." He trailed off, eyes narrowing faintly. "Some folks been talking, though. Black car. Sitting outside now and then, like they're gonna rob the place." David's jaw tensed. "You get a plate?" "Wasn't that kind of neighborhood," Greg replied, mouth twitching in dry humor. "But yeah, that didn't sit right with me either." Seeing this was a dead end for now, David thanked him and made his way back out onto the street. The weight of fatigue pressed in, the night's work gnawing at his edges. Time to call it a night. He headed home, to cold sheets and whatever quiet his mind would allow, intent on grabbing what little sleep he could before the city pulled him under again. If Dylan were home, David would have been home hours ago himself, made some dinner, caught the tail end of a ball game, maybe filled the place with the sound of knives on a cutting board instead of silence. But for now, sleep would have to do. By the fourth day, he decided to stop chasing shadows. If there was something to this Elma lead, he'd see it for himself. The ride upstate offered the kind of scenic distraction Tacoma always delivered. Evergreens crowding the highway, mountains looming in the distance, the occasional sleepy logging town dotting the roadside. Elma was one of those towns, small, blue-collar, a couple of dive bars, and not much else. Even creeping through town past midnight, there was nothing promising. No girls walking the streets, no obvious signs of new business, just dark storefronts and rain-soaked sidewalks. David stayed another day to be thorough. The nightlife, such as it was, revolved around the handful of pubs and bars. Asking the right questions at the right bar earned him a direction, a wink toward where the real fun happens, courtesy of the bar owner. It took exactly one conversation with the girl he propositioned to know something didn't add up. No new girls, no new faces. No one heard a whisper about Vega. Red flags. David's thoughts churned the whole drive back. If Vega wasn't moving in on Elma, where the hell did those girls go? David made a slow cruise through the neighborhood before calling it a night. Tacoma was asleep, just a few bars glowing dim on side streets and old neon signs humming above shuttered storefronts. But then, as he coasted past an alleyway off Ashwood, something caught his eye. Harold. Or at least, the shell of the man David used to know. Dressed in a dark coat, shoulders hunched, moving like he didn't want to be seen, Harold slipped through a narrow doorway tucked between a pawn shop and a boarded-up laundromat. No markings, no windows. Just a steel door, half hidden in shadow. David's gut tightened. That wasn't the kind of place a grieving father looking for peace stumbled into. He parked across the street and approached. The door was guarded by a man built like a bar bouncer, but carrying himself like more than hired muscle. Buzz cut, scar along his temple, eyes sharp despite the casual slouch. "Members only," the guy muttered, stepping in David's path. David held his ground. "I just need to talk to my friend. The guy that just walked in, Harold Mercer." The doorman smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. He turned his hand palm up, showing the back. Tattooed there in stark black ink was a familiar symbol. Twin V-shapes, one upright, one inverted, joined at the tips. David's stomach sank. He'd seen it in Harold's books, on the pages that whispered promises and old, dangerous things. The guy let the hand linger long enough for the message to land, then dropped it. David stepped back, eyes narrowing, but didn't push it. He turned, walking away, pulse steady but tight with unease. Harold wasn't just grieving anymore. David's stomach growled as he drove. After the sighting at the club, his nerves were taut, but a man's got to eat. He swung by an all-night diner, the kind that hadn't changed its menu or its cracked vinyl booths since the 70s. Coffee thick enough to strip paint, a greasy burger, and some fries. It didn't settle his nerves, but it kept the engine running. It was nearly 1 a.m. when he pulled up to his place. The moment he stepped out, his instincts itched. Second floor window, slightly open. David never left windows open. Ever. Years of military habit didn't break just because you bought a house in Tacoma. His hand slid to the holster at his waist as he moved toward the door. Steps measured, eyes sharp. Inside, the house stood silent, an unwilling observer of actions yet taken. Clearing a house wasn't new to him. He'd done it in muddy compounds halfway across the world. But tonight? His own walls felt like unfamiliar terrain. Living room, clear. Stairwell, clear. But as he rounded the landing to the second floor, he felt it. A whisper of movement behind him. David spun, but not fast enough. The hit came like a freight train, lifted him clean off his feet and slammed him into the far wall. Drywall cracked behind his shoulder with a hollow crunch. His pistol clattered and skittered across the floor. A bat. Someone's forearm. He didn't know. Pain surged through him like electricity through a power line. Dazed, his vision swimming, David forced himself to focus. In the hallway a few feet in front of him stood a man, but not a man. For half a heartbeat, his face shifted, skin rippling like water. Beneath, burnt, cracked flesh. Eyes black like an endless night. A hint of fangs behind a thin, inhuman sneer. Then, normal again. David shook his head, trying to make sense of what he'd just seen. His pulse slammed in his ears. The thing advanced, slow, confident, like it knew there was nothing David could do. David scrambled, snatching the nearest thing, anything within reach. A ceramic bowl, a lamp from the entry table, and hurled them. One shattered uselessly against the wall, the other swatted to the ground. The thing smiled wider. David glanced over his shoulder and grabbed the small salt lamp off the table. Heavy, but instinct screamed for action. He hurled it with everything he had. Glass shattered. Chunks of salt exploded across the floor. A hellish scream ripped through the room. The demon recoiled, sizzling where the salt struck exposed flesh. Its human mask cracked, just for a second. That was all he needed. David surged to his feet, shoulder blazing with pain, dove for his gun and spun, weapon raised. But it was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just gone. The house was still again, but the silence felt worse now, heavy, tainted. David's heart hammered against his ribs as the adrenaline bled away, replaced by a deep, clawing chill. He grabbed his jacket, keys, phone. Home wasn't safe. Not anymore. The ER doc patched him up, bruised ribs, minor concussion. They asked questions. He gave them just enough. Said there was a break-in, that he fought back, that he didn't get a good look at his assailant. By the time they let him go, the sky was shifting, dark blue fading into the first smear of morning. David didn't drive home. He sat behind the wheel of his truck, parked beneath the hum of a gas station canopy, the engine off, the world quiet around him. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. The thing's face, if you could call it that, kept flashing behind his eyes, wrong in ways his mind struggled to accept. Harold had gotten himself buried in something real, and now whatever line David had walked before was gone. He'd seen war, killed men, watched friends bleed out in dirt halfway across the world. But this didn't belong to any battlefield he understood. It followed different rules, carried a weight he couldn't measure. And sitting in the silence, blood dried on his shirt, he knew the truth pressing behind his ribs like a second heartbeat. He couldn't face this alone.
He survived the night, but just barely. Bruised, bandaged, and sitting outside a gas station with questions still clawing at his mind. David sure knows this is no longer just about Harold. Something deeper is moving through Tacoma, and it's watching him. Part 4 of Inheritance. Bloodlines drops in 2 weeks. Until then, stay sharp, stay curious, and if you're enjoying the journey, like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts down below. As always, if you find yourself lost along your travels, let our light be your guide.